There was a moment here in Australia, when the wind seemed to whisper more than simply breeze. The red dust settled on the horizon. The gum trees held their silence like a secret. And somewhere out there, in a town most people have never heard of, a door was left open. Not just a door to a house. A door to a different kind of life. Everyone thinks moving to Australia means Sydney's traffic, Melbourne's rent, or Brisbane's relentless summer heat beating down on a bank account that never quite recovers. But here is what nobody tells you. Scattered across this vast, ancient continent are towns so desperate for people, so hungry for new stories to write into their streets, that they are offering cash, land, and incentives that sound almost too generous to be real. And most of them are completely legitimate. We are counting down 7 Australian towns offering serious money, sometimes grants, sometimes free land, sometimes both, just to get you to show up and stay. One place will help pay your moving costs and set you up with a community before you even unpack. Another sits beside a river that glows at dusk, where a house costs less than a second-hand car in the city. One region has a reef you can reach on a weekend without a plane ticket. And one place has a lake that turns blue every spring as if the earth itself is trying to tell you something. Think you know which Australian towns are paying people to move? Cool. Let's see if you're ready for places where your bank account finally stops apologizing and the landscape does something to your soul that rent anxiety never allowed. Like this video if you've ever dreamed of being paid to start over somewhere new. Subscribe. Because one day you'll want an escape plan that comes with a signing bonus. And this channel is your relocation guide with real research, not Instagram fantasies. Let's break it down. Number 7. Queenstown, Tasmania. Queenstown, Tasmania does not apologize for what it is. The mountains here are bare. Not bare like neglect, bare like the earth decided to show its bones. Centuries of copper mining stripped the hills of their green, and what remained was something raw and strange and oddly beautiful. These are not the soft green mountains of the East Coast postcards. These are mountains that look like they have been through something and came out the other side without needing to explain themselves. This is a town that has known hard times the way old timber knows weather. Population has fallen steadily for decades. Young people leave for Hobart, for Melbourne, for anywhere with more opportunity and faster internet. The streets remember them. The shopfronts remember them. And in that quiet, in that particular kind of emptiness that only former mining towns carry, something stubborn remains. The West Coast Council looked at the numbers, the falling population, the empty houses, the school rolls shrinking year by year, and they decided to start offering money for people willing to show up. The Tasmanian government and local council have supported relocation grants of up to $6,000 Australian for eligible individuals and families willing to move to the West Coast region. That is money in your account for choosing a different postcode. Additional support through the remote area tax offset provides ongoing financial relief for residents of designated remote zones, which means your tax bill gets smaller simply because of where you live. Not once. Every year. Housing prices are among the lowest in Australia. Median house prices sit around $130,000 to $180,000 Australian. Rent can be as low as $180 to $250 per week. Not per person. Not for a room in a share house with a stranger who steals your leftovers. For a house. A standalone house with walls and a yard and a door you can close behind you. Someone who made the move wrote online, "I came for the grant. I stayed because I could breathe." In Sydney, money disappeared before I could see it. Here, it actually means something. The catch, and there always is one, is that Queenstown is remote. Genuinely remote. The nearest major supermarket is a drive. The landscape, while extraordinary, can feel isolating in winter when the mist sits on the bare mountains for days at a time and the light is thin and gray. The economy is slowly rebuilding around tourism, around history, around a growing arts community that has been quietly discovering what those stripped, copper-colored hills look like when a painter decides to pay attention. But it is rebuilding. You would be part of that story, not arriving after it is written. And there is something in that. There is something in being the person who shows up before the place becomes what it is going to become. There is something in being early to a story that most people will only discover once it is finished. Picture this. You are sitting on the porch of a house that cost you less than a year's rent in Melbourne. The mountains, those strange, bare, copper-colored mountains, catch the last light of afternoon and turn a color that has no name in the standard vocabulary. Something in you goes quiet. Not empty quiet. Full quiet. The kind you forgot existed somewhere between your last 3 jobs and your 8th lease renewal. Would you move somewhere the earth shows its bones if the rent cost almost nothing? Drop your answer below. Number 6. Broken Hill, New South Wales. There is a painting in Broken Hill. Not in a gallery, on a wall. On a rock face. Across the corrugated iron of a fence. This town does not contain art. It is made of it. The light here, that flat, fierce, silver light of the far west, has been pulling artists for over a century. Pro Hart lived here. The Brushmen of the bush painted here. There is something about a landscape that refuses to be soft that makes serious artists pay attention. Broken Hill sits in the far west of New South Wales, closer to Adelaide than to Sydney, in the middle of the Barrier Ranges where the light does something to color that photographers spend their whole careers trying to capture and never quite do. It is the kind of place that looks better in real life than in any photograph, which is unusual, and which tells you something important about what kind of place it is. It was built on silver, lead, and zinc. The mines are still here. So is the spirit. But population has been drifting downward, and the city knows it needs new blood. Not tourists passing through on their way to somewhere else. Actual people. People who will buy the house and stay for the school year and argue about the footy and become, over time, part of what the place is. Broken Hill is designated as a remote area under Australian tax law, meaning residents receive the remote area tax offset, a permanent, ongoing annual tax reduction. It does not expire. It does not require an application every year. You live there, you get it. The New South Wales government has periodically offered specific relocation support for healthcare workers, teachers, and essential service professionals, sometimes $10,000 or more. Housing is extraordinarily affordable. Median house prices sit around $175,000 to $220,000 Australian. Rent sits around $200 to $280 per week for a standalone house. The town has full amenities. A hospital, schools, supermarkets, an airport with direct flights to both Sydney and Adelaide. That last point matters more than it sounds. Broken Hill is remote, but it is not cut off. You can get on a plane and be in Sydney in under 2 hours. You can have the city when you need it and then come back to the wide silence and the silver light and the paintings on the walls. One teacher who relocated said, "The grant covered my moving costs entirely. And then I realized my mortgage was $800 a month. In Sydney, that was my share of a 2-bedroom flat. The trade-off is distance. Broken Hill is a long way from anywhere by road. Summer heat is serious, temperatures regularly above 40 degrees. The isolation is real. But it is the kind of isolation that some people do not just tolerate. They find themselves inside it. They discover that the self they were running out of room to be in the city had plenty of space here, had always been waiting for somewhere quiet enough to exist. Picture this. You are walking through a town where every second building is a mural. The sky above the outback is so wide it makes you reconsider the word horizon, because the word implies an edge, and this has no edge. You own a house here. A real house with a yard and a shed where you put things you're not sure what to do with. And your tax return is quietly, reliably, larger than it used to be. Would you trade proximity to the city for art, sky, and a mortgage you can actually breathe through? Number 5. Northam, Western Australia. Northam has a suspension bridge that sways when you walk across it. It is not a metaphor, though it could be. The Avon River runs beneath it, patient and unhurried, brown with the memory of rain, and on its banks, white swans, the only wild white swans in the southern hemisphere, move like slow thoughts in calm water. There is nowhere else on earth where you can stand on a swaying bridge and watch white swans move through morning light, and that fact alone says something about how unexpectedly particular this place is. This is the Avon Valley, 97 kilometers east of Perth. Close enough to the city to matter. Far enough away to be different. The kind of distance that sounds like an inconvenience until you realize it is actually freedom. Freedom from the noise, from the density, from the feeling that the city is always pressing in from every direction and there is nowhere to simply be still. The Western Australian government's Regional Centres Development Plan has allocated funding to communities like Northam to attract and retain residents. Eligible movers, particularly those in skilled trades, healthcare, education, and remote work, can access grants between $5,000 and $10,000 Australian through state and regional programs. Housing prices are genuinely accessible, median around $260,000 to $320,000, a fraction of Perth's median. Rent averages $280 to $350 per week for a family home. Northam has a full hospital, schools, supermarkets, and a regular rail connection to Perth that takes under 2 hours. That rail connection is important. This is not an either-or choice. You can live in Northam and work remotely and take the train to Perth for a meeting and be home for dinner. You can have the swans and the suspension bridge and also the city when you need it. A remote worker who moved from Melbourne wrote, "I kept my Melbourne salary and moved to Northam. The maths were embarrassing. I was saving $2,000 a month without changing anything except my postcode." What makes Northam interesting beyond the numbers is the texture of the place. It is a functioning country town with a real community and a real history. The farmers' market on weekends. The pub that has been the pub for as long as anyone can remember. The way people nod at each other in the street not because they are performing community but because they actually know each other. Picture this. It is early morning. Mist sits low over the Avon. You cross the bridge, and it sways just slightly, just enough to remind you that some things are more solid than they appear, and some things that appear solid are hollow, and the difference is worth knowing. You have a grant in your account, a house that does not hollow out your savings, and a city 2 hours away when you need it. The white swans are doing what they do. Would you move to a place with swans on the river and the city still in reach? Number 4. Mount Gambier, South Australia. There is a lake in Mount Gambier that turns blue. Not always. Not on a schedule. Not because anyone asks it to. But each spring, the water shifts from gray-green to a blue so vivid, so genuinely unreasonable, that it looks like the sky fell in and decided to stay. Scientists have theories about algae blooms and water temperature and calcium carbonate. Locals mostly say the lake does what it wants. Both explanations feel correct. Mount Gambier sits in South Australia's southeast corner, a city of around 30,000 people built around the crater of an extinct volcano. It is South Australia's second largest city, though most people outside the state could not place it on a map, which is either a failure of geography education or a gift, depending on how you feel about being discovered. The South Australian government's Moving to the Regions initiative has provided direct cash grants to eligible remote workers and families relocating to regional South Australia, up to $10,000. Mount Gambier is included as a qualifying destination. Housing median sits around $300,000 to $360,000, dramatically below Adelaide. Rent averages $280 to $380 per week for a family home. The city has a full hospital, a university campus, multiple high schools, an airport, and a regional economy built on timber, agriculture, and a growing tourism sector that keeps discovering the volcanic landscape that most of the country still does not know exists. The word caves is worth dwelling on. Mount Gambier sits on a limestone base riddled with cave systems. The most famous, Engelbrecht Cave, is partially submerged and used for cave diving. The city is built on something it has not fully explored, which is either unsettling or thrilling depending on your relationship with the unknown. One family who relocated from Adelaide wrote, "We got the grant, bought a house, and our children are in smaller classes with teachers who actually know their names." That was not in the brochure, but it should have been. Mount Gambier is not a compromise. It is a city with real infrastructure, real culture, a farmer's market that takes itself seriously, live music venues, restaurants with menus longer than one page, and a lake that turns blue in spring as if to remind you that extraordinary things happen quietly, away from where everyone is looking. Picture this. You are standing at the rim of a volcanic crater, looking down at water that is doing something water should not be able to do. Behind you is a house you own, in a city with a hospital, a university, a coffee shop where people know your order by the third visit. The grant is in your account. And the lake is blue today. Would you move to a city built inside a volcano if the lake turned blue every spring and the cost of living did not break you? Number 3. Orange, New South Wales. Orange has 4 seasons. This sounds ordinary until you have lived somewhere that does not. Until you have forgotten what cold mornings smell like, what cherry blossoms do to a street in September, what it means to watch a hillside turn from green to gold to bare and feel the year actually moving. In most of Australia's major cities, the seasons are suggestions. In Orange, they mean something. They arrive with conviction and they change the quality of light and the temperature of the air and the way the town feels to walk through, and after years of living somewhere seasonless, this alone can feel like a kind of gift. Orange sits on the central tablelands of New South Wales, about 260 kilometers west of Sydney. Population around 40,000. Elevation 860 meters. Cool enough for world-class cool climate wines that have been winning international awards quietly and consistently for 2 decades. Warm enough to live without misery. The New South Wales government's regional relocation grant provides up to $7,000 Australian for homebuyers moving from a Sydney metropolitan area to a regional New South Wales location. Orange qualifies. Additional stamp duty concessions for first home buyers in regional New South Wales can save between $10,000 and $24,000. Median house price sits around $550,000 to $650,000, significantly below Sydney, though higher than the more remote options on this list. Rent averages $380 to $500 per week, still dramatically below major cities. The town has a full base hospital, a Charles Sturt University campus, excellent schools, a genuinely good food and wine scene, and direct daily trains to Sydney. That train matters. 3 hours and you are in Central Station. 3 hours and you are back. Orange is not asking you to disappear. It is asking you to relocate, which is different. You keep your connections. You keep your options. You just stop paying Sydney rent. A remote worker who made the move from Sydney said, "I kept my Sydney job and moved to Orange. My mortgage is half what my rent was. I have a garden. I had forgotten gardens existed as a concept I could personally access. Orange is not cheap the way a struggling town is cheap. It is the kind of affordable that comes from being genuinely good but not yet discovered by the people who would ruin it by discovering it. It has the food culture and the scenery and the community life of a place that has been quietly getting better for years without needing anyone's approval. Picture this. It is autumn. The vineyards on the hills outside town are turning amber and rust. You are in a restaurant where the wine list features bottles made 12 kilometers away and the menu reads like someone actually cares about food. Your mortgage is manageable. Your grant is processing. The seasons are doing what seasons are supposed to do. And Sydney, when you need it, is a train ride and a different world away. Would you trade the city for 4 seasons, wine country, and a mortgage you could breathe through? Number 2. Regional Queensland. The Outback Incentive Zones. Queensland has towns where the street is wide enough to turn a bullock wagon. This is not an accident. It is a memory. These streets were built for a different scale of life. A scale where distance was measured in days not minutes, and every town was a small world with everything it needed inside it. The hardware store, the pub, the hospital, the school. Everything in walking distance, because walking was how you got anywhere and the world was the size of what you could walk to. Towns like Longreach, Emerald, Barcaldine, Roma. They sit out in the Queensland interior where the sky is the main event and the land stretches in every direction without apology, and the silence at night is so complete it takes getting used to. You can hear things in that silence that the city noise had been covering for years. And the Queensland government has been paying attention to the fact that people are leaving. The numbers are clear. The young leave for Brisbane and the older ones follow when the medical needs get serious and the towns thin out year by year. And so the response has been money. The Queensland government's Workforce Connect and regional incentives programs offer payments between $5,000 and $15,000 Australian for eligible workers relocating to designated regional and remote Queensland communities. Healthcare workers, teachers, tradespeople, and essential services professionals are particularly targeted, with some packages exceeding $20,000 when housing allowances and professional bonuses are included. House prices in regional Queensland towns like Longreach or Barcaldine can be as low as $150,000 to $250,000. Rent in some of these communities sits below $200 per week. Remote area tax offsets apply to many of these locations, providing ongoing annual financial benefit. That combination, the upfront grant, the low housing cost, the ongoing tax offset, means that for certain people in certain professions, relocating to regional Queensland is not a sacrifice. It is a financial strategy. It is the kind of move that people make quietly and then mention 5 years later when their savings account looks nothing like it used to. A nurse who relocated to a regional Queensland town wrote, "The package covered my move, gave me a signing bonus, and my rent is $210 a week. I have not looked at my bank account with dread in 2 years. I forgot that was possible." The honest trade-off is distance. You are far from everything familiar. Summer is serious heat, the kind that makes you reorganize your day around it, that teaches you things about shade and timing and hydration that city life never required. The isolation will test you. It will ask questions about who you are when there is no noise to fill the space, no distraction to reach for, nothing between you and the actual texture of your own company. But it will also show you something about yourself that comfort and proximity tend to keep hidden. Picture this. It is late afternoon in the Queensland interior. The light has gone gold and long. The shadows lean east like they are pointing somewhere important. You are sitting outside a house that costs almost nothing, in a town with streets wide enough for a bullock wagon, under a sky that is doing something the city sky never could. And somewhere in your account, there is money that arrived simply because you were willing to be here. Would you go where the sky is the main event if the money made it worth it? Number 1. The Greater Whitsundays and Mackay region, Queensland. There is a stretch of Queensland coast where the Great Barrier Reef begins to breathe. Where the water turns from green to the kind of blue that makes you stop mid-sentence. Where the Whitsunday Islands sit on the horizon like a thought you can almost remember, like something you knew once and have been trying to get back to. Where the air smells like salt and rain and something alive that you do not have a word for. The Mackay and Whitsunday region. Encompassing towns like Mackay, Proserpine, Bowen, and Collinsville, has been one of Queensland's most strategically active areas for relocation incentives. And the reason is simple. It has something most incentive towns do not have. It has the reef. It has the islands. It has the sea. And it still desperately needs people. The towns here are functional and real. This is not a resort. Mackay is a city of 80,000 people with a sugar cane industry and a mining services sector and a hospital and schools and an airport with direct flights to Brisbane, Melbourne, and Sydney. Proserpine is a smaller town surrounded by cane fields with the mountains behind it and the Whitsundays in front. Bowen is the town where the tomatoes come from, a quiet, unhurried coastal town with a beach and a pub and a pace that does not rush. The Greater Whitsundays Alliance and the Queensland Government jointly fund the Live, Work, Play in the Whitsundays initiative, offering relocation grants of $5,000 to $15,000 for individuals and families who relocate to the region and commit to residency. Additional trade and skills incentives can push total packages to $20,000 or more for eligible workers in construction, healthcare, hospitality, and marine industries. Median house prices in Mackay sit around $380,000 to $450,000. In Proserpine and Bowen, much lower, $250,000 to $330,000. Rent averages $350 to $450 per week in Mackay. Under $300 per week in the smaller towns. And then there is the reef. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest living structure on Earth. It is 2,300 kilometers long. It contains more than 900 islands and 3,000 individual reef systems. It has been here for 500,000 years. And if you live in the Whitsundays region, it is accessible on a weekend. Not a holiday. Not a once-a-year expedition. A weekend. You get on a boat on Saturday morning and you are there. Someone who moved from Sydney wrote, "I used to spend $600 a week on rent and look at a brick wall. Now I spend $350, and on weekends I'm on the reef." I don't know how to explain what that does to a person. That sentence contains something important. There is a version of your life that is affordable and also extraordinary. There is a version where the trade-off is not between what you can afford and what makes you feel alive. There is a version where those two things point in the same direction. The trade-off is not nothing. Cyclone season is real. Between November and April, the region watches the weather with a particular kind of attention that becomes part of how you live. Summer humidity is persistent and serious. The isolation from major cities is genuine, and some people discover after 6 months that they need more of the city than they thought. These are real considerations and they deserve real thought. But the reef is there. The islands are there. The water is the color of something that should not be free. And somehow, with the right grant and the right timing, it almost is. Picture this. It is a Saturday morning. You did not set an alarm. You are on a boat, 20 minutes from shore, and the water beneath you has gone from green to that blue, that particular, unreasonable, world-stopping blue. Below you the reef is doing what it has been doing for 500,000 years, quietly, impossibly, patiently alive. Coral in shapes that have no equivalent on land. Fish moving through it like color-made animate. The whole thing operating on a time scale that makes your concerns feel appropriately small. Your mortgage is manageable. The grant covered your move. Your rent is less than you were paying for a view of a brick wall. And the water is that blue again. The blue that makes you stop. The blue that makes you wonder, with complete sincerity, why you waited so long. And in that quiet hush, beneath the whispering gums, out on the reef, in the wide silence of the Queensland interior, standing on a bridge that sways over white swans, at the rim of a volcanic crater looking at a lake that chose to be blue today. I realized not all shadows hide. Some simply invite us to see. We just counted down 7 Australian towns that will pay you to move there. Some give you cash. Some give you land. Some give you a reef, a volcanic lake, a river with white swans, mountains that show their bones against a sky you have never seen so wide. The money is real. The distances are real. The trade-offs are real. But so is the possibility that somewhere in this ancient, enormous, quietly extraordinary country, there is a door left open. And it has your name on it. Like this video if you just learned that Australia is paying people to discover it. Subscribe. Because the best relocation decisions start with real information, not Instagram filters. What moment in nature has made you pause and see deeper? In your stillest hour, what truth did you feel but could not name? Share it below, because you are not the only one asking. This video expresses poetic and reflective storytelling. Grant amounts and program details are based on publicly available information and may change. Always verify current eligibility directly with the relevant state government or local council before making relocation decisions. It does not offer financial, legal, or psychological advice.